Today on Spotlight, I bring you my thoughts on one of the latest updates Bloodstained Ritual tonight received this free DLC, Classic Mode. Now this is just one of the few modes that 505 Games promised to deliver during the game's Kickstarter campaign, which included also, a Zangetsu mode, where you play the game again as, Zangetsu. Boss Revenge mode, where you play as the bosses themselves in sort of like a neat twist on the standard boss rush formula. There's another playable character, I think it was the Blood Lady. Hold on, let me actually check my notes here. Bloodless. I think that was her name, yeah. Now you might be thinking, oh, does this mean we're not seeing a round 2 for Ritual of the Night? To which I say, of course you are, but I'm waiting for the remainder of the updates to be released before I consider doing so. And based on the backer emails I received every once in a while, there's still several things to come, including Chaos Mode, Versus Mode, a second crossover event, because this game just did a crossover with Kingdom 2 Crowns. I haven't experienced that one for myself yet, so we'll check that out later. There's promise of another playable character, and out in the distance you can see on this image here that the devs have plans for the second quarter of the year and maybe beyond. So I think a dedicated round 2 is likely not in the cards until next year at the latest. I'm treating it like I did with Shantae Half Genie Hero and how that eventually got the Ultimate Edition, with all the DLC included. When Ritual of the Night is all wrapped up, that's when I'll do the second review, but Classic Mode today gets a dedicated spotlight to it because, well, I'm in the middle of making that Dragon Quest V review. It's an RPG, I need time for that. And I also like my Classic-vanias, I need something to fill the time. And I also want to satiate your YouTube appetites and appease the algorithm gods with another gracious upload. But before we get into the nitty gritty, I want to thank Cove for sending me their Cove Commuter 2, a lovely Bluetooth stereo speaker system. Now this is just a thing I need for my workstation. I got wires all over the place because of my equipment. And sometimes I want the headphones off of my head. I got them over my ears all day because of work and all that. Sometimes I just want to escape and let my music or podcast audio blast through these sleek speakers. Up to 7 hours of playtime possible on a single charge. It's simple as pie to connect via Bluetooth. Even has this nice little strap so you can, hang it on a coat hanger when you're done with it for the day. When combined, it creates a nice 360-degree surround sound to keep your ears immersed. But get this, you can also... Actually, no, it's 2 speakers. This is what I prefer personally. Matches the aesthetic better, and I got clean sound coming from the left and right side of the area. Not to mention, these dudes can get crazy loud. Click the link in the description below and use the code JCOVE65 to get over 67% off your order today. That's a lot of money you're saving, so jump on that while you can. And don't actually hang your speakers from a coat hanger. Thanks to Cove for the product, and thank you for helping support this channel. Shall we continue on with the show then? Alright, so without further ado, this is Classic Mode for Bloodstained Ritual of the Night. A completely free add-on made available as soon as you boot the game up. You don't even need to finish the main campaign to have Classic Mode available. It's right there from the start, available on whatever platform you decided to get the game on. Once again, like I did in the review, I'm playing the PC version of the game. It's always a really cool thing to see devs making good on their promises for their Kickstarter campaigns, when they reach those goals and what have you. Even though Classic Mode, I gotta say, I feel is more of an obligation rather than just, making good on a promise. I mean, it's cool that it's out either way, but, I think I remember stating in my original Ritual of the Night review, maybe it was the Curse of the Moon reviews, I don't know. That's just it. I thought Curse of the Moon, that and its sequel, were the 8-bit games, or the Classic Mode that Koji Igarashi and 505 Games were initially promising. I thought Curse of the Moon was that game. But then, later down the road, as Ritual of the Night is finally released, they start giving us updates about, the release of Classic Mode. It's like, oh, so there's something else? I mean, Classic Mode is a completely different thing. I swore that's what Curse of the Moon was, but no, it's just that's just something they did with Inti Creates, on their downtime, or just as a nice little love letter to Classic-vania fans. But here's another love letter to Classic-vania fans, using Ritual of the Night assets. So this is within the game itself. You don't have to purchase Curse of the Moon if you want some Classic-vania action in your Ritual of the Night. And man, holy shit. I mean, it's not, you can look at the footage for yourself and see what exactly Classic Mode is. It is a 2.5D adventure, complete with a whip attack, stiff jumps, bullshit jumps, knockback. It is a tried and true Classic-vania experience that loves to ape the shit out of Castlevania 1. Fucking hell. Everyone has made the critique or compliment about how Ritual of the Night is basically just Symphony of the Night with the serial numbers filed off, and Whether that's a good or bad thing, it all depends on why you got invested into the Bloodstained series to start with. Like me, as a longtime Castlevania fan, Bloodstained was my answer to a Castlevania-less, is that even a word? Castlevania-less world that I've been living in since, I want to say, the late 2000s. I know there have been Castlevania-related things released since Order of Ecclesia, but to me, that is still like the last real Metroidvania, Castlevania experience that I've had the pleasure of playing. I don't want to put down Harmony of Despair too. Harmony of Despair was a good time. But either way, Castlevania to this day remains a heavily neglected franchise from Konami, and it really doesn't seem like they're doing anything with it. So for me, I look at Bloodstained as a means to fill that gap. And so far, it has been doing that job tremendously well. But back to my original point, where was I going with this? Because I kind of just trail off there. Whether or not you viewed Ritual of the Night as taking so much from Symphony of the Night and just doing it again with maybe some updates and all that, whether you viewed that as a good or bad thing, that is at the end of the day what the game was, and that's what it was trying to be. I mean, that is kind of the entire point of Bloodstained, is pretty much just to fill the void that Castlevania, well, more like fill the void that Konami left with the Castlevania franchise. So it's likely if you're thinking of playing Bloodstained, it's because you are a Castlevania fan, or maybe you're interested in the Castlevania series and you want to try a more modern take at it. But while Ritual of the Night took so much from Symphony of the Night in terms of the Metroidvania formula, Classic Mode takes so much from Castlevania 1, the first game specifically. And you see it as soon as you start the game. You see the map icon every time you transition between levels. The level design, with some exceptions, is almost one-to-one Castlevania 1 level design, to a point where, man, like, I don't know exactly how the law works when it comes to just ripping level design and just plastering on something else and calling it something. I don't know how any of that works, but in my eyes, Classic Mode taking so much from Castlevania 1 is way more blatant than Ritual of the Night just calling back to Symphony of the Night altogether. Like, to me, it is so much more obvious, and it's at a point where it's so derivative that in a way kind of makes it hard to recommend, because if you ask me, like, could you recommend Classic Mode in Ritual of the Night right off the bat? And I'd say there's no harm in it, because it doesn't cost any, I mean, you're paying for the base game, obviously, but it doesn't cost any additional money to try the mode out yourself. Again, it's just something extra for the game. It's available in the game's extra mode. You can just play it whenever you want. But to compare it to what it has taken so much of, Castlevania 1, is it better? Is it the same? Is it worse? I would say I would play the original Castlevania 1 before I'd play Classic Mode of Bloodstained Ritual of the Night. Because one, by principle, Castlevania 1 is a more original property. Bloodstained Classic Mode is just Castlevania 1 with Bloodstained assets. And maybe that's enough for you. Maybe you like Miriam more than Simon Belmont. Maybe you just like the aesthetic. Maybe you just like the world of Bloodstained more than Castlevania, but you still want your Classic-vania action. And if that's the case, then by all means, play Classic Mode. It is almost one-to-one the same goddamn game. Like, again, there are level design differences. There are some differences in terms of boss fights and all that, but it is so goddamn similar to the original Castlevania that, again, I will not be surprised if at some point I see 505 Games trending as if they're getting sued by Konami. It's like, but you just took Castlevania 1 and you just put Bloodstained characters all over it. It's like... It's like one of all those goddamn Supreme shirts you see at a boardwalk. Like, just ripping all these character IPs and putting them in fucking these different outfits, and just like, yeah, this is original. I'm totally making money off of someone else's work. Which I know has always been the point with Bloodstained, because fuck, man, I want more Castlevania action, but it comes to a point where it is so obvious what they're taking from, but it's like, maybe we should reel it back just a bit. Again, I guess that's my only real criticism with Classic Mode, just as a concept. Because we're not even talking about like the actual game itself yet. Like, just mechanically speaking, we're not there yet. But just like the concept of Classic Mode, I feel now more than I did with Ritual of the Night that maybe. Okay, maybe you're just fulfilling an obligation, and that's great to see. I'm glad they're making good on their promises. Classic Mode is here, like they said it was going to. All right, let's dig in and have fun with it. regardless of how a derivative it might be. But I think after this, we got our Classic-vania, Castlevania, nostalgic love letters, that's all said and done. But starting with the next game and beyond, let's not make it so obvious. I don't know. Well, then again, I say that. Maybe a second classic mode that apes from Simon's Quest, but it's better. Doesn't sound like a bad idea. So maybe I'm wrong. Just keep going with it. Anyway, I guess the only thing that legitimately bothers me, just in terms of just like the presentation and all that, is because it is 2.5D, and there are a few jumps in this game that are a little tight and not exactly pixel perfect. Well, you can't really say pixel perfect. There are no pixels, but they are as tight as some of the most pixel perfect jumps in like classic Castlevania games. It makes it hard to gauge where you should be positioning yourself exactly. There's one jump in particular in the underground stage that I think I fell down like 3 or 4 times because it's hard to gauge where I should be standing exactly because, in a 2.5D environment, there's nothing as definitive as like blocky sprites where it's easy to gauge where you should be standing. But because of a 2.5D graphical setting where you have a more dynamic field of view, I guess I should say, it's kind of hard to put into words, at least in my eyes, because I have a very limited vocabulary and sometimes that can be really dumb. It's hard to know where to stand exactly to get the most out of your jump when you're trying to avoid a bottomless pit. Not something that permeated through the entire game because I can only think of like 1 or 2 jumps that gave me a lot of shit, but it's just something I have a problem with in general with 2.5D adventures that have limited mobility options because of the things they're harkening back to. Music's great though. I'm not sure if it was the same folks who did the Ritual of the Night music, just tapping into their old school Yamahas or their 8-bit instruments and all that. It sounds great. Pretty much what I expect from a 8-bit Classic-vania soundtrack. Although the credits sequence is most definitely super Castlevania 4 inspired. I love it. Not just the musical piece in itself, but like I love all the little images that chronicle Miriam's adventure through the classic mode experience. I want to see more of that, not just limited to like classic mode and all that. I just love seeing nice little touches handled like that for just games in general. I love seeing like images that highlight the things that we've done in the game. So I'm hoping that's something that returns in a Bloodstained sequel or an update to classic mode. It's the little things that put a smile in my face. But yeah, because it's so much Castlevania 1 that I feel I can probably just save you time by telling you guys to go see my old Johnny versus Castlevania 1 video. I mean, it's one of my older videos, so I'm definitely not as seasoned then as I am now, although your mileage may vary on those claims. But almost all the problems that I have with Castlevania 1 are here in full force. I mean, Miriam is not one-to-one a Belmont or Simon Belmont specifically, because she does have it a bit better in terms of mobility. Like, her jump is a little stiff, but she can slightly influence her jumps in midair. Like, you can control your momentum a bit on how far your forward jump's trajectory is going to reach. She also has the Richter somersault. That's what I call it anyway. Basically, like Richter Belmont in Rondo of Blood or Dracula X, if you've only played the Super Nintendo game. You can do a backward somersault by tapping the jump button twice, and with good timing, you can use it to avoid a lot of attacks and all that. She also has a backdash, which, no shit, I didn't know she had until the end of the game, when the game just blatantly told me, oh, there's a backdash. I did not know that I can do that. Because normally when I go into a game, or an extra mode, I should say, I don't bother looking at the options, or at least the controls configuration, because I was like, oh, it's Classic-vania. I'm assuming I'm only going to be able to jump and whip. And then I do the somersault, and I was like, okay, I guess they got to have the Rondo of Blood callback. But no, she also just has a backdash. And you can use that, I guess, in some cases, like with some of the boss fights, especially like the Doppelganger boss fights, because that fight was a pain in the ass. You can use it to avoid like Zangetsu's sword swing or what have you. I ended up playing and beating the entire game without using the backdash at all, mainly because I didn't even know I could do it in the first place. So I guess I could say it's not a necessary movement, just for the sake of playing the game, but it will make your life easier if you know it's there and try to use it to the best of your ability. Miriam is also capable of, I mean, just going through my checklist of what makes Miriam better than classic Belmont. She can jump on stairs and she can jump off of stairs too. And that's like, hallelujah. That's always one of the go-to things I check when it comes to Classic-vania experiences. Like, can I jump off the fucking stairs? Can I jump on the stairs? Because man, I hate when I'm locked to stairs and I gotta whip bats or Medusa heads or awkwardly wait for a skeleton to go past the top of the stair, the bottom of the stair, so I can just safely traverse through with it, you know. And thankfully Miriam is capable of just jumping off the stairs when she wants to, so thank you. I do appreciate that. Unfortunately, that's where the enhancements sort of end, because everything else is basically just Castlevania 1. I noticed that there wasn't any whip upgrades. I was whipping candles left and right, expecting to get like those standard, like the tier 2 and a tier 3 whip upgrade. I don't think those are a thing in this game. I think this game has the critical hit from Castlevania 1, or it might be a maneuver altogether, because I didn't see how I can activate it at will, where sometimes Miriam's whip will glow blue. I think it's like some sort of lightning strike. And it only happened every once in a while because I wasn't sure if I can do it on command. I did try to do some standard like movements. Like I tried the quarter circle forward motion, because when in doubt, do a quarter circle forward motion with the attack button to see if you can trigger anything. Nothing happened. But then every once in a while, I'll just find myself doing it at random. And I think, oh, is that the way the game signifies the critical hit? Because that was a thing in Castlevania 1 where your whip will do a critical shot. It was really rare, but it did a lot of damage, and maybe that's how this game signifies that you did a critical hit. Or maybe it's an input and I'm just being really dumb and I just don't know how to do it. Maybe it's like a forward tap with a whip. I don't know. But Miriam also has the classic sub-weapons, the dagger, the cross, the axe. Of course, I'm saying all these classic names, but they're not really the dagger. I mean, the dagger's a dagger. You can't really fucking put a patent on a knife. There's not an axe, but there's a bone. The holy water's still the holy water. The cross is more of a shuriken. And the stopwatch is basically just her time stopper ability from Ritual of the Night, which again, I think is also just a straight up JoJo reference. And they're great to use. They got me out of a pickle more than a number of times, especially the holy cross. The holy water is, oh my God. I'm at the 5th or 6th stage. I'm not sure which one it is. And I was like, I'm seeing like, all right, so this should be the death level. I know what to expect from this level. It's got all the beats. I'm serious, like it's hitting all the same fucking beats again. This game takes so much from Castlevania 1. I know the boss is going to be death, or whatever Ritual of the Night's equivalent death is. I think it was Gremory. So I need the holy water strat, and it doesn't quite work the same way, but it ended up being my go-to weapon for most of the game, because again, it's the holy water. Like Classic-vania holy water was just busted, like straight up busted. Yeah, it takes a lot of ammo to use, but man, it's like, as long as you hold on to it, the game is yours. What's maddening though is that for some baffling reason, this classic mode also decides to have the stupid sub-weapon limitation where if you accidentally pick up another sub-weapon that you didn't want, whether it's because you got a little too whip happy whipping candles, or maybe you got an unlucky drop from an enemy, because I think enemies do drop sub-weapons every once in a while, the sub-weapon just gets straight up replaced and there's no way you can get it back. And I'm not crazy, right? Like I didn't imagine this. Nobody fucking liked that, right? That's why they got rid of it after Castlevania 3. I think Castlevania 3 was the last game to do that. But they brought it back for this one. It's like, guys, sometimes you leave all the archaic shit in the past. Not everything is a nostalgic throwback. Some shit was just a pain in the ass, and all you're doing is just reminding us of said pain in the ass. I don't like having pains in my ass. Stop that. Get out of here. But that aside, if you loved Castlevania 1, and you really want to play Castlevania 1 again, go for classic mode. It's a good little time sink, because it took me about an hour to finish the first time on the normal difficulty. There's 3 difficulties total, easy, normal, and hard. I've not experienced hard yet, but if it's anything like the second loop of Castlevania 1 and beyond, it's likely, I mean, the enemies are probably just faster. I don't think this has any multiple endings or all that, because the original games didn't really have any multiple endings. Well, Castlevania 3 depended on who your partner was, but Castlevania 1, if this mode is borrowing so much for that game didn't have multiple endings at all. So I think the harder difficulty is just, do you just want to have a harder time, Or maybe there's an achievement tied to it. I didn't check the achievement list. It is a perfectly harmless extra mode that you can play on your downtime if you don't feel like getting into the Metroidvania experience. Or maybe if you've been curious about playing a Classic-vania game and you didn't play Curse of the Moon, you didn't feel like investing extra money on a different game and you just wanted to wait for this, free add-on to get here, and you wanted to see what a Classic-vania mode was like, then, Classic mode is a good representation of that. This is what you missed out in like the last 30 years. And if you hate it, well, then go back to Metroidvania, because I think that's why a lot of folks prefer the Metroidvanias over the Classic-vania experience, because man, these games can get ball-bustingly hard. Although I would say that this game overall, I didn't find overly punishing, but I also feel that's because I played so much Castlevania 1 that I'm just banking on instinct or previous player experience. I'm getting to certain points of the stages like, all right, then this should be here. And that should be there. I'm expecting these enemies to be here and all that. And I'm right like 85% of the time. So for me, I don't think the game was that challenging. Certainly not on a level of like Castlevania 3 and all that. But it is certainly more difficult than the standard Ritual of the Night experience, just to compare it to what's already available on the same game, It does feel a little redundant in the grand scheme of things because we have both of the Curse of the Moon games and within Ritual of the Night itself, because if you remember, Ritual of the Night also had that 8-bit dungeon in the main game, which I thought like, oh, maybe this is the classic mode they were talking about. Maybe they couldn't get the development time to do a dedicated classic mode, or maybe because they knew that already doing stuff with Curse of the Moon, that, let's put like a 8-bit aesthetic into this one area for Ritual of the Night, and there you go. We fulfilled our promise of classic mode. But then no, they just make another fucking mode with limited movement, 2.5D graphics, Classic-vania as tried and true as you can get. Again, in an age where we already have both of the Curse of the Moon games, it does feel a little redundant, but it is nice that they're fulfilling their promise regardless. So it is completely harmless being here. You got nothing to lose. And I maybe not in the game. No, you got everything to gain, because you might gain a nice fulfilled experience if you decide to tackle it, but you are not missing anything by not playing it. In fact, just play Castlevania 1. I still to this day love Castlevania 1. I know there's always a stigma of like the first game of the series is always like the first game of the series. It's so archaic, but I will defend Castlevania 1. It is still a fantastic game that, yeah, it's hard, but it is so gratifying to play and complete. And hey, if you ended up liking that, man, do I got a mode in Ritual of the Night for you to play? Because it's basically the same fucking thing. I know I've been saying that all day. I think I said that maybe like 10 times throughout this spotlight, and just how classic mode is just Castlevania 1 with Bloodstained assets. And I think that's where I'm going to leave it off for today. Just to reiterate, a more dedicated round 2 of Bloodstained Ritual of the Night will happen once all of the DLC for Bloodstained Ritual of the Night is released. And I'm talking like all the modes they have planned for the first quarter of the year, whatever they have in store for the second quarter of the year. When all that's released, that is when I'll get ready for a round 2. And I'm looking forward to that, because again, I bring up Shantae Half Genie Hero. That was a game that was already fine, like in its initial release. It was a little empty, but when Ultimate Edition came out and it had all those modes available, it became a much better purchase that late buyers could relish in more than, I guess, dedicated fans, because didn't know the pain of waiting because they, weren't interested in the first place. I feel the same could be said with Ritual of the Night when it gets all the DLC, despite thinking that Ritual of the Night as is a phenomenal game. That if you haven't played yet, if you are a fan of Metroidvanias, you are sleeping on a really fucking good Metroidvania. And I know there is bias in me saying that, because you guys know me. I love my Metroidvania games, and I will recommend a great one when I can find one or when I'm recommended one. But do not sleep on Ritual of the Night. It is so fucking good. And while you're at it, like, buy all the Castlevania games too. I love Bloodstained, but I also love Castlevania. And I just want to see Castlevania continue. Castlevania continued properly. No fucking pachinkos, no soulless mobile games, none of that. The Netflix show was fine, but man, I want another Castlevania so bad. But you know what? Bloodstained more than makes up for it. And that's where I'm going to end today's video. Here's an end screen to link you to a playlist of other spotlights that I've done. You put them as background noise, whatever you decide to do. I appreciate your time and company anyway. Thank you all for watching. Have yourselves a fantastic night. Stay safe, wash your hands, wear a mask if you decide to go outside, please. And do take care of yourselves.